Hello,
Hello.
everybody, and welcome back to
What
What
the
the
Deaf?
Deaf podcast.
We're so excited for you guys to be here on the second episode. And whew,
Well, we totally had a What the Deaf moment this morning.
that's right.
So, on our last episode, we had talked about what experiences that we had with COVID and the barriers with wearing a mask and communication. And it actually happened this morning when you and I went to go take a test.
Yeah, that's right. We were working on a film. Carly was the ASL consultant for, and I was acting in it. And we pulled up to take our COVID test. I rolled down my window, and there was a woman in a mask, started to try to talk to us. And we said, we're deaf. So she was said, oh, okay. She has kind of like a binder with questions on it. So she flipped over the questions. We said, yes, no. She flipped over another one and finished all that. Then she wanted to say something else and tried to gesture something. It was like a flu shot. She tried to spell something. And it got to the point where we were like, we don't know what you're trying to say. And she was so frustrated. She was like, oh, just go ahead. Just go ahead. And we were like, okay. So we just pulled out to try to find where we're supposed to go.
Basically, they left us not knowing what was going on. What was the question? Was it important? Was it not? Do we just follow the signs? And so we got to where we needed to and took the test. And after we left, we still didn't know what was going on. We had maybe, some assumptions of what was said, but we needed a total understanding in the context of what was being said there. So it's amazing how many people in 2020, people are so unaware of what's going on, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going on with the elections, what's going on with everything. While deaf people, they go through that so often with communication barriers where we don't understand or we can't find another way of communicating. So we just leave it and just say, never mind. So,
And that
yeah.
brings you back to memories of social gatherings sometimes. I would interact with hearing people and I would miss some of the conversations and I would ask somebody like what they say. And they would always say, oh, I'll tell you later, or it's not important, and move on. And I was like, okay, I felt so excluded. And I know many other deaf and hard of hearing people feel very similar, especially during the holidays.
This is the worst time for deaf and hard of hearing people. A lot of us suffer through the holidays and the struggle with being capable of communicating with our own family members or in general. I remember growing up, I live in a deaf family. So some of my friends from my deaf school would actually want to come over to our house for the holidays instead of spending the holidays with their own family. And their parents could feel the disappointment. You would rather go over to a friend's family's gathering rather than being with your own family. Again, that's the lack of understanding how important the access of communication is for deaf and hard of hearing communities. In my family, my parents are deaf, and my dad was actually born hearing and became deaf at a later age. So his entire family is hearing, and the amount of sign that they know is very, very little. It's not enough to be able to hold a in-depth conversation with a lot of context. And so for me and my Christmas gatherings, maybe the first 5 to 10 minutes were fun. We get to see everybody and say our hellos. But after that, I hit a wall with that. And our conversations, our discussions about my life, it's just not there. And so I find myself sitting at the table with my own family and siblings, and we leave. So my desire to go to Christmas gatherings have reduced significantly compared to when I was a little kid because of not having the full access to language to be able to really interact and talk about life, or it's very minimal. And now that I'm older, I have a lot of stories that I want to be able to share or experiences, but because of communication barriers, it's not there anymore.
Yeah, that's also interesting. It's interesting how your extended family on your dad's side doesn't sign, but yet we've had strangers in the past that we've met who make the effort to learn to fingerspell, learn to gesture, or even just ask us, are we okay? those little things like that, including, for example, my really good friend who's now become your really good friend. She, before you even thought about moving here to California, she did not know any sign language. And then she realized you were moving and the three of us are going to be working out together. And on her own, she decided to take ASL class and learn the language because she knew we'd be hanging out together. And she didn't want the responsibility to be on me to interpret everything. And you and I have had that serious discussion about how my friends who don't sign and who will step up to the plate to want to interact with you on their own. Because, like you said before, beautifully, you can't learn to speak, but my friends can learn to sign. And that is,
And I want to be able to get together as friends instead of getting together with your friends and put the burden on you to facilitate the conversation. I want you to be able to hang out with your friends instead of having to facilitate conversations. I don't want that for you. And so little things like that, they don't know what that means to me and in the general population. It's always the little things that hearing people invest time for, deaf people, it means so much to them, more than they could ever know. I remember when you and I went to the gym when I was living in Nebraska, we went to that gym that I attend regularly almost every day, and we saw that elderly man, and he's there every single day. He shows up just to walk around the track, maybe a mile or a few miles, just to get his exercise in. He literally one day came up to us while we're working out and finger spelled his name and then said that we make him happy. But again, I'm like, no, you just made us so happy. One, he's an elderly man, and that just shows that it's never too late to learn how to sign. Never. It's never too late. And you were able to do your own research on your own without asking me to teach you anything. So he did this all on his own. And it just, it touched me so dearly, more than he will ever know. And still to this day, I obsess over that. And I always wonder how he's doing and I think about it. And I just wish I could be able to thank him again and tell him how much that truly, truly meant to me, because so many people in my life who I have known for my entire life still to this day don't even know how to sign. They tell me every time we get together, oh, I will, or oh, I wish I had time.
or I want to.
Exactly. And or I can't, or, just little things or those little words that I hear all the time from people that I've known my entire life compared to a man who still to this day we don't know each other. I don't even know his name. Still made time to fingerspell and just to let me know that. It just, oh, it touched my heart.
Yeah, and finally, my dad started learning sign language. So growing up, my mom signed a little bit. My sister, better when she got older, but my dad never really invested time to learn sign language when I was growing up because I can talk and hear. So they thought it's not important for them to learn sign language. But then when you came and visited and were thinking about moving to California, my dad really realized some things because my dad's the type of person who wants that interaction and conversation, bubbly personality, just like me, and he wants to really have a deep connection with people. And the first time where he picked you up at the airport to surprise me for my 26th birthday.
That was a powerful moment. So I was planning to surprise you, and I had asked your dad to come pick me up at the airport. And granted, before that, we were always able to interact with your dad, with you there facilitating the conversation. And so at the airport, we got into the car and he started driving and realized that he couldn't really talk to me while he was driving. Plus, he didn't know sign language. He couldn't really gear to me and talk, and just started kind of, thinking in that moment. And it looked like he was a little disappointed in himself that he didn't know sign. And he really wished that he could, so that he could talk to me in the car before getting to you. And so it was just a very huge barrier that we both felt. And we saw how much that affected your dad and realized, like, I really want to be able to have a conversation with you and not feel so conflicted. So I think that was a huge impacting moment for your dad. And now he's learning sign.
Yeah, and I finally feel like he gets it and why it's so important for him to learn sign language. So now he's taking classes and he's really rolling up his sleeves and wanting to learn. And my dad's older, so it's harder for him to retain the information, but he's so motivated to continue with it, to the point where I finally had a moment of, oh my God, I feel free. So the three of us were in the jacuzzi in the backyard of my parents' house. And for the first time in my 27 years of life, I took out my hearing aid out of the hot tub and I did not use it once. And I finally sat in the jacuzzi and I felt like I could just talk with my dad and I didn't have to rely on my hearing to struggle with the conversation. And now he is in my shoes. He's struggling to interact with you and me, but he's doing really well. And that feeling of determination and trying and investment touches my heart. And I finally felt like I could just be Sarah.
Yeah. And to add to that, I remember a moment when your dad was grilling outside and you had gone into the house to talk to your mom, and your dad finally had that opportunity to have a conversation with me, and it went so smoothly. And he said, "Hey, I'm finally able to do this with you without Sarah. And I really like being able to have this conversation and bond. I feel connected with you more." And I just, we've always had a bond before, but maybe with somebody else, you being there to facilitate, interpret, and it limits it. But now I really could just talk to him and converse with him.
It's those little things that make an impact and make a difference. And the fact that we have listeners right now willing to hear us out and hear our stories and open their hearts and open their minds to us and learn, you have no idea how much this means to us.
And that brings me to my question that I remember seeing. It's from Kayla from Colorado. She asked, what deaf people would like for non-deaf people to know about the deaf community?
That's a really good question. Thank you, Kayla, for your submission. My thing is, we are all human. We're just like you guys. We go through our struggles, our journeys, our positive, our negative situations, our conflicts, just like you guys. We just don't focus on the ear. We're more than just deaf. Deafness does not define who we are at all. You are Carly. I am Sarah. We go through and navigate life just like you guys.
Yeah. Every day we go through things where people will look at us and say, "Wow," for being deaf, and then just leave it at that without really investing the time to develop that bond. So I think it's really important for non-deaf people to really realize that we are just human beings, and all human beings love a connection, a relationship, friendship, family bonds. And by having that connection, we need to be able to communicate fully. And so, for example, in the previous episode, I mentioned that I worked as a behavioral health coordinator where I provided tons of different presentations. For a hospital audience, I always emphasize and repeat over and over how significant it is for them to build a connection with patients. Say a patient stays overnight compared to a hearing patient or a deaf patient, the nurse will come in to a hearing patient's room and just have a conversation, have a discussion, and say, "Hey, did you catch that football game today? Who's your favorite team? How are you feeling? Pain management," like all that. And they'll be able to have that and form a connection with the patient and the nurse and be able to prescribe medication. While on the deaf's behalf, they come in, they give a medicine, give them a thumbs up, and they're out the door. And so it's just the lighthearted, brave conversations are not there. And so I always emphasize the importance of that, because you walk into a hospital, you're there because of a negative reason. There's something wrong, or other than birthing a baby, that's the only positive thing, but something, and you already go in there so tense. And so I think it's important to have that connection with the nurse and know that we are okay. We're human. We are welcomed as a patient. And I always emphasize that. So in general, we are human overall. Don't reject us just because there's a communication barrier, because you're not in your comfort zone and you're able to have a conversation with us. We're out of our comfort zones every single day. So you can make a little bit of time in your lives to make us feel human.
Yeah, we literally all have had what the death moments, like seriously. And I just think it's such a common thing that we all go through, our struggles. It's so true.
Again, this is exactly why we have this podcast, to open the door to welcome all questions that you might have, to help understand that we are actually humans. We're still learning about our own selves, and we have a lot of stories to share. Without the communication barriers, you're able to learn about us and our connections and our everyday lives, and all of your questions will be answered.
Speaking of everyday lives, Kyle from Indiana asked, how do you wake up in the morning?
Hmm. I open my eyes. I'm kidding. But all kidding aside, an alarm clock, obviously, I cannot hear. And so there's a few different alternatives to that. My parents, growing up, I remember that they use flashing lights. It plugs into their alarm clock, and when it goes off, the lights flash and they wake up. That does not benefit me at all because I'm a deep sleeper. I sleep right through that. So there's a vibrating alarm clock that you plug in and you stick it underneath your mattress or your pillow or whatever you prefer, and it shakes your entire bed. I'm not kidding you.
Literal earthquake.
I wish I could show you how strong the vibrations are. It will literally shake you right out of bed.
Yeah, I remember one time in high school, one of my friends was sleeping over at my house and I forgot to turn off my vibration alarm, and the next morning it was shaking so loud to the point where my friend thought it was an earthquake. So I was sleeping and I just woke up normally and I looked over at her and she was freaking out and I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Turn it off, sorry."
It can be a nightmare for some people, especially it's not that smooth transition to wake up. It's like, boom, good morning, earthquake.
But maybe some hearing people need that.
Right, right. So there's that. And then, with today's technology, there's more and more access. You got your watch, you have an Apple Watch that you can use. And sometimes on trips, that's nice. You don't have to grab all of your equipment and put it in our bag. You can just use your Apple Watch and you can set that vibration on there. But it's less powerful, which might be good.
Do you sleep through that sometimes?
No, not yet. It hasn't happened, but I'll keep that in mind as an excuse if that ever does happen in the future.
And yeah, I remember one time I was working on a film and I had an early morning call time. So I was freaking out about it. And for the first time, I decided to sleep in with my hearing aid on because, oh, and I also brought my vibration alarm clock. So I had three alarms set on my phone, plus my vibration alarm clock because I was so scared to miss my alarm. So I slept with my hearing aid in, and I don't get how hearing people can sleep with the noise. Like, I could literally hear cars going by, the AC blasting. I could even hear myself like move around. I could not sleep, but I still suffered through it and I made it. But my God.
And before, like in middle school and high school, they have tell me three things about yourself. And I always say, I can sleep through a thunderstorm. Because again, I could not imagine listening to a thunderstorm all night and waking up all night while I'm just knocked out. And I wake up and I'm like, oh, why are you so cranky? Oh, you heard the thunderstorm last night, huh?
Or saying also in California, so we have earthquakes. And I actually thought it was my alarm one time when an earthquake was actually happening. It's a California problem. Wait, no, it's a what the death problem.
Definitely. So, talking about how you wake up to an alarm clock, doorbells, sirens, fire alarms. We had a person ask, how are we aware of the fire alarms, sirens, and doorbells?
Well, for me, growing up in a hearing family, I relied on my parents for the doorbells. I could sometimes hear it, sometimes not. Sometimes I would psych myself out thinking I heard something, but really it wasn't anything. Or sometimes people would be waiting outside the door for like 10 minutes and end up calling the house phone. Back then we had a landline. And I would answer and I'd be like, oh, sorry. And I would open the door for them and let them in. And that's basically how I did it growing up. But fire alarms I could definitely hear, and especially at Gallaudet University. And it's the worst because the lights with the fire alarms, and I sleep with a mask on, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like a rave. I'm at a rave. And I would never forget the first time.
And for all you listeners who have no idea what Gallaudet University is, Gallaudet University is actually the only university that is all deaf, hard of hearing interpreters all on one campus. It's such a visual campus, as you can say. But yes, fire alarms in college life, you can only imagine how many there are.
Yeah, like 2:30 a.m.
And how many times it's happened throughout the night. And you get to the point sometimes where a fire alarm happens and I'm like, you know what? I just hide in my closet. And then I start to second guess. I'm like, wait a minute. What if it's an actual fire?
But there never was.
No, I'm still alive. I'm still here. So we're good.
But growing up, how did you hear the doorbell?
So doorbells. I live in a deaf family household. So I can only imagine hearing people who come to our house, they'll probably think that we like to have parties all the time because the lights are constantly going off everywhere in the house. When the doorbell rings, the lights flash. Same with the phones. When the phone rings, even when a baby cries, the lights will go off. Yeah, so you can only imagine a hearing person who comes into our house for the first time in a deaf household and a doorbell goes off and they're like, what's going on? The lights are flashing. And then the phone rings and the lights are still flashing.
Did your sister's friends, did they ever freak out?
Not freak out, no, but I mean, probably the first time, but they know us as a deaf family household. So I think they just enjoy coming to a deaf house because, hey, they can say whatever they want. They can sneak out easier. Well, they think they can, but they can't. So there's that. And then we rely on the dogs, actually. We had family dogs growing up, and they were our ears in the house, other than my sister. They both will run up to the door or they'll sit and wag their tails. They're letting us know that something's going on. Even my mom would use the dogs to call to my dad if my dad was working in the shed or something. We live in the country growing up, okay? And so mom would cook dinner and she would want to tell dad. So she'll say, Sammy, go get dad. And Sammy would run down to the shed and sit there and look at my dad. And my dad would have that instinct to be like, oh, obviously the wife needs something. So dogs and flashing lights is literally how we lived.
I want your dog. My dogs were not that smart. They would run into glass doors.
California hearing dogs.
Exactly. I need your dogs.
Yeah. So, anyways, for sirens, again, deaf people are very visual. And so we drive with our instincts and our visuals. We heavily rely on that for the roads. You don't need to hear to start a car, anyways. And so, yes, to answer that question, we drive based on our visuals. And, you know, sirens oftentimes they have big lights. So we notice that, or you notice cars getting off the road. And so typically you'll follow that.
I tend to honk until I realize, oh, there's a siren. My bad. Sorry.
That sounds like you, Sarah.
Thanks.
And a benefit for me is I don't hear honking. So anytime somebody's honking at me and they come up and they're raging and I'm like, hey, hi, what's wrong? Oh, you just honked at me. Well, I didn't know.
That's so funny. It's interesting how our upbringings are so different. Again, we're both deaf, but our journeys through life are so unique. Oh,
Yeah. Well, I think we answered all of the questions that we had for today.
if you want to submit your curious questions, you can email us at questions@whatthedeaf.com.
And follow us on Instagram at What the Deaf.
See you next week, guys, and see you soon. Bye.